everyone. Welcome. I think I'm really excited because we got a fantastic panel here to talk about Bitcoin in Latin America and the emerging markets. We're going to jump right into it. I'm going to ask the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and also give me the most interesting thing that's happening with Bitcoin in your country right now. Yep, take it away.
My name is Rodrigo Batista. I run mercadobitcoin.com.br. That's the biggest Bitcoin and virtual currencies company in Latin America. We have an exchange that trades Bitcoin and Litecoins, and we do have a payment gateway, the same model as BitPay is. I used to work for as an algo trader for Morgan Stanley in New York and in Brazil, and also algo trader for some major Brazilian banks and Spanish bank Santander. And I joined the Bitcoin world in 2012 as a trader, and now I run the exchange since 2013.
And something about what's happening with Bitcoin in your country?
So Bitcoin markets in Brazil is I think it's the more solid one. We do have my exchange, and that accounts for 90% of the flow in Brazil. We have 4 or 5 other ones that share the remaining 10%. Brazilians mostly use Bitcoin to speculate. The payments in Bitcoin are done by some Brazilians, but they usually pay purchase that they do abroad. So usually Brazilians that pay with Bitcoins are paying for services in US or Europe or sometimes in China, because even with the China restrictions, there are still some stores that take Bitcoins as payment. And the market's growing a lot. We trade about, our exchange trade about $5 million a month. In value in Bitcoins and Litecoins. So, and we expect this year going to be like a game changer because we're going to have more stores and more companies taking Bitcoin as a payment, as a form of payment.
Fantastic, thanks. Edan?
My name is Edan Yago. I'm CEO of Epiphyte. We are a company that provides back-end services and technologies that power Bitcoin companies in the developing world. Nothing that we do is branded as Epiphyte, but we power several exchanges and merchant processes in Central America and other developing world countries. I'm also a board member of DATA, which is the international self-regulatory body for cryptocurrency, industry, and my particular focus is on the emerging world. And I'm also involved in the Free City project in Honduras, where we are working on developing zones which will have autonomy to create their own legal structures, and these legal structures will be innovative, allowing, amongst other things, currency competition within the zones and basing the currencies of the zones on cryptocurrencies. Originally, I'm from South Africa. So I'll talk about that country. We recently had something very exciting happen. The largest African bank, Standard Bank, who are an international bank, became the first bank in the world to announce that they will soon be opening Bitcoin-denominated accounts for their customers. So we are starting to see the traditional financial world enter into Bitcoin, and we're seeing it happening in the developing world first.
Hello, my name is Gabriel Miron, and I'm the CEO of MexBT. We are about to launch the first trading platform for cryptocurrencies in Mexico and part of Latin America. The most interesting thing that it's happening in Mexico, I think it's what we're selling $5 worth of Bitcoin to kids of 13 and 15 years old. We have a cash payment network that has 130,000 places where we can take cash. So Walmart, 7-Eleven, convenience store, etc. So.
My name is Nina Ukuku. I am a partner with Venture Gain Legal, and I'm also CEO of a company called Black Founders Startup Ventures. Venture Gain Legal is a law firm that focuses on early stage tech companies and also creatives, and quite a few of our clients are playing around in the Bitcoin space and doing a couple of things that scare us, such as playing around with escrows and other things of that nature. The other hat that I wear is with Black Founders Startup Ventures, where we exist to increase the number of successful Black tech founders. The people within our ecosystem are everyone from startup founders all the way up to angels. Well, angels and also VCs. I am Nigerian in background, and the most interesting thing about what's going on in Nigeria is that basically the space is wide open. There's not a whole lot necessarily going on with Bitcoin. However, there's a lot going on dealing with mobile and dealing with mobile payments, and there's quite a bit of room for new products to be developed. We'll share.
Thank you. Hello. My name's Jeff Berwick. I'm the least credentialed person on this panel by far. I'm just a freedom fighter against mankind's two biggest enemies, the government and the central banks. I write something called the Dollar Vigilante. And the biggest thing that's happening in my country to do with Bitcoin is I don't have a country. I think Bitcoin's incredibly exciting. I don't know why I'm on this panel, because it was supposed to be a Latin American panel, but I was really happy to see a black girl here and a white South African. I'm from Canada originally, but I don't really go there. It's way too cold. So that's basically my story. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks. I do hear there's something called Gulch in Chile?
Yeah, there is something called Gulch in Chile, yes.
And they accept Bitcoin?
Oh, yeah. I have a number of real estate ventures around the world, including in Mexico. I think that's how I first got invited onto this panel. I live most of the time in Acapulco, Mexico, and we also sell condos there. We just sold a few for Bitcoin. For people who haven't thought about it, if you have a business and you don't accept Bitcoin, you're crazy. You should definitely accept Bitcoin. It just opens up new marketing avenues to you, and especially if you announce it. So if I just announced, for example, with Gulch Chile, we have a real estate project in Chile, and we just announced we're going to accept Bitcoin, and a lot of people bought with Bitcoin. We said we're the first one in Chile to accept, and you can do the same thing in whatever country you're in. It just opens up a whole new market to you. Really, it's crazy not to accept Bitcoin in whatever business you're in.
Thank you. Because we have such a large panel for the next questions, I'm not going to ask everybody to answer, but whoever thinks he's in a good position. So the next question we had is the question. Obviously, Latin America, emerging markets are a very cash-rich economy. There's a lot going on in cash. So the question is, how do we bridge the gap between, on the one hand, the local cash market, and on the other hand, this money in the cloud that's Bitcoin? How do we build those bridges in between these two worlds?
So what most people might not realize is that the United States government has been doing quite a bit of work in Africa dealing with mobile payments. And one of the projects that they started working with was how to essentially take money on phones, just like credits, and get people to be able to use that within their home villages. One of the projects that they did is that they basically set up almost like, think of, has anyone ever gone overseas and you've ever had to refill your phone credits and you go to these small little stores? Anyone been? Okay. Anyways, so you have women who are inside these stores, and essentially they serve as an exchange for cash for credits on the phone. Except in this case, the credits are being used are essentially money. And so structures like that are already being set up and being tested overseas, at least in Nigeria and also some other places further down in South Africa. So I really see that as being a great way for there to be a leap from going from a cash-driven society to one that's a little bit more mobile, more cryptocurrency driven.
Interesting.
I would say there are 4 factors that need to happen for us to see real mainstream adoption happening in the emerging countries. The first has nothing to do with Bitcoin, but has to do with smart phones becoming cheap enough for emerging countries to start using them in large numbers. The reason is that at the moment the carriers are locking down the feature phones that people are using and basically making it impossible to use anything which isn't proprietary to the carriers. And so we need to see the network effects that become available through an open system like Bitcoin through smartphones. The second thing that we would need to see is we would need to see adoption by thought leaders and primarily financial leaders within those countries. Now, this is happening, and it's exactly the same pattern that we've been seeing in the Western world, but they are somewhat behind in that respect because this kind of effect is emanating out of primarily the United States and Europe. The third thing that we would need to be able to see is, I think, a technology which is currently missing from our technology stack, which is some way for us to denominate a stable currency which people are familiar with on a Bitcoin-like network. That's coming, probably in the form of colored coins or master coin. People will be able to have pesos which actually are held on the Bitcoin protocol. But it's a very complicated thought to hold Bitcoin, and if you're buying groceries with it, it's too volatile, and for the foreseeable future it will remain too volatile. And then finally, I think the fourth factor that we would need to be able to see is we would need to start seeing either import or export become possible for these countries. So people be getting paid in Bitcoin by, if they're being paid by Westerners to do outsourcing, or being able to import commodities using Bitcoin. Those are the four factors, and I think we're going to start seeing a convergence of them over the next 24 months.
Thanks. Another question is about the remittance market. This is a huge market in Latin America, emerging markets. People have family members that work abroad and they want to send money home. And companies like Western Union charge, I've heard stories in Guatemala, people say it's 20% of that's being charged of the money that you want to send home. In Argentina, it's apparently even 60% today that you have to give to the remittance company. So question is, could remittance be Bitcoin's killer app for emerging markets?
So I'm just going to say something short here, which is I think it's a bit of a myth that remittance is so expensive. In Argentina, it is expensive because they are forced to work according to the official currency transaction exchange rate. But for most of Latin America and East Asia, Western Union is actually very, very cheap and getting dramatically cheaper every single year. So I think that there is a very important play here, but just being cheap is not going to be good enough.
So I agree, just being cheap is not going to be good enough. What the problem is with things such as Western Union and companies like that is that, so I'll give a little bit of a story. My father went to Nigeria to bury my grandmother last year. He sent a large sum of money overseas to be able to to use the money overseas. The unfortunate part is that Western Union automatically flagged it as being fraudulent because we were in the United States sending money to my father in Nigeria. Their solution to that, my father to come back from Nigeria to come prove that it was actually him that initially sent the money over. And so for me, the issue, like why I like things such as cryptocurrency, is that we're not dealing with that sort of issue. There's not this already built-in bias against people from different parts of the world as far as sending money home.
Right, no artificial filters, just person to person?
Just person to person, and I think that's the best way.
And one last additional thing is that usually they advertise like that people pay 1% or 2% for remittance, like companies like Western Union and Zoom that are the biggest ones. But they somehow make a lot of money in the FX rate. In fact, they charge this small fee, like 1%, but the FX rate that they charge at the end is much more than that. That's why we go to the 20%, 15%, or 60% in the case of Argentina.
Right. That's a good point. Final two questions. Are there any ideas about Bitcoin as a vehicle for direct investments in emerging markets? Is there a future for that? Are there features of Bitcoin that make it very suitable for this? So investments coming from the Bitcoin cloud straight into these emerging markets. And on the other hand, do you see any challenges? Do you see any problems that have to be overcome for that to happen? Thinking about crowdsourcing and all those kind of things.
Crowdsourcing, for example, has not been like as useful in Brazil that I can talk about, but as it is in US, for example. I think that we do have like very tight regulations for financial investments. So it doesn't matter how a Brazilian company gets its money, but it has to say to the government how it got it. So it would solve the speed of the money flowing to the companies in Brazil, but the main issue today, that's local regulation, it will still remain, and Bitcoin will not do anything about it.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
So I think one of the one of the investments I was looking at was investment in a remittance company based in Kenya, who are being set up by locals to make remittances from Dubai to Kenya much easier. And they were looking for a small investment for a large equity stake, which is a great opportunity if you can invest in these high growth countries. But the problem was that it's very difficult to make investments in those countries because it's not clear what legal protections you have. With Bitcoin, it becomes even more complicated because how do you even prove that you actually provided anyone any funds at all? And moreover, how do you, how can you be certain that 6 months to a year from now, those countries are going to recognize Bitcoin as an official currency and accept the fact that you could make such an investment? So I think for direct investment, the regulatory issue is the biggest and most expensive issue, and probably it's going to be solved first in Latin America, long before it's solved in Africa.
Talking about regulation, do you have any more thoughts about this? Is it very similar in emerging markets? Is it diverse? And what are the specific challenges as far as regulation goes?
Yeah, for Mexico, for example, at the moment there's not regulated. The National Bank Commission said that it wasn't related to the financial industry. Here it is. That's better. That it wasn't related to the financial industry, and they're still not willing to take a stand, but we can operate at the moment.
So for Brazil, it's I think for the first time ever, we have like a business environment that's easier to deal in Brazil than in US. So my company is set up like as any intermediation company. We are very confident with this arrangement. We have good lawyers that are okay as well. So we don't have to, for example, to deal with state regulations as the companies in US have to deal with. So we have a 2 million people market that's already open for the Bitcoin. So it's more a matter of education. So regard to our central bank, they already issue a letter stating that it's not their, today they won't regulate Bitcoin or virtual currencies in general because they think it is still a small market, but they, as many other central banks in the world, they say that Bitcoin is a risk investment and all that stuff. I think that's good. People need to be aware that they can't put their money that they would use to buy food in a high risk investment. So we are in Brazil. We have a very good regulation and it's working well. But we expect new stuff coming, and probably by the end of the year or next year when the economy of virtual currencies grow more.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the floor. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, microphone is coming.
Standing up here, that'd be great.
Hi, my name is Jay. I'm the CEO of Just Soy Bitcoin. And I wanted to ask you, how would you agree with the following statement that Bitcoin biggest challenge in Latin America, it's not technological, because you guys are on the technological back end, but educational. Yes. And what kind of opportunities do you see in educating the Latin American market in Spanish, for example, like providing content in the Spanish language for for the Latin American people? Any probably from Mexico, Gabriel?
Yeah, no, I think it's a huge opportunity. Like, we have been organizing different meetups, and there's a lot of people really interested. But there's a need for content and information in Spanish because, well, almost every information that exists is in English. So yes, it's needed.
Okay, so thank you so much.
So about Brazil, we speak Portuguese, and it's even harder because there is more information in Spanish, for example. What we do now, for example, we are starting producing Portuguese material or translating English material to Portuguese. So, for example, this week we are launching that famous Bitcoin video from We Use Coins. So we just finished translating it to Portuguese because we just had it in subtitles, and Brazilians don't feel like they don't like reading subtitles at all. So if you go to Brazil, every single movie you see the mouth going this way and the voice going.
I wish I could speak Portuguese, but I don't.
It's easy for you. So basically it's that, like on the education side. But I disagree that education is the only big challenge because Bitcoin is still very depend a lot on banks and normal institutions that we have today, like governments. If you take big economies like Argentina and Venezuela that would somehow benefit from virtual currencies, they are not that deep into virtual currency businesses because their banks are all in trouble, their governments and the politics on them are in trouble, so people don't have a way to buy coins and to transfer coins abroad. So we do have a political issue and an institutional issue because Bitcoin is still very, very tied to regulated institutions.
Jeff? Yeah, just briefly, I'm a sort of a media guy, and I haven't seen a lot of really great stuff in other languages other than English, and that's a big problem. However, in the last year or so, I've started to see so much. And for example, we have something called the Dollar Vigilante, and we started up now Dollar Vigilante Latin America, we're Dollar Vigilante in Spain, we have Dollar Vigilante in Germany, and I've just partnered up with people around the world, and they just take our content and translate it. And actually, our business is quite a profitable business. So look for opportunities like that. Look to partner up. For example, if someone in Brazil wants to just take our content and translate it, and we have a lot of products that people might want to buy because of those things, just get out there. Things like I do a podcast called Anarcast. We're starting to do Anarcast in Spanish now. I started it out on my own, which is mi español es poco mal, pero you know, just get out there and do these kind of things.
Yo Soy Bitcoin, it's going to be a YouTube channel just in Spanish.
Excellent.
Like just in
Excellent.
Spanish. Like very, very recent news, all Bitcoin news for the Latin America public. So
perfect.
Just to add, I would suggest you also contact the people from El Bitcoin, the website. Okay. They're the most popular Spanish blog. I also hear rumors that this magazine is going to be translated into Spanish soon. So that's a great introduction. You can leave it in businesses and banks. It's a great overview of the industry. And also, like, finally, in Guatemala, there's a university, Universidad Francisco Marroquín, who is very much on board with Bitcoin. They would love to do more things with it. So people that are more in the academic sphere, definitely contact them and see if you can work together. They're going to integrate Bitcoin in their MBA program. There's definitely a lot moving. Next question?
Hello. My name's Ryan Nill. I have a question kind of following up on the remittances. So it's difficult just to get, you know, Americans who are very use a lot of technology to use and accept Bitcoins. Now, when my parents send money to my family in Mexico, I mean, I think we touched on the education topic just a minute ago, but when they don't even have the technology to use Bitcoin, how do we kind of get the adoption of the technology for the remittances to even be useful?
Is the question clear to the panelists?
So my question is that since in a culture that uses a lot of technology like the United States, it's difficult to get people to use and accept Bitcoin. Now, how do you get people who might not even have access to technology to use Bitcoin? So, you know, I might want to send my grandma in Mexico some Bitcoin, but if she can't even receive it, how do we kind of spread that process along?
I think there needs to be something that sort of sits in that gap. And so, for example, with the whole idea of phone credits, I'm sure your family understands that. Same sort of thing overseas in Nigeria. So there needs to be something that sort of sits into the gap to where you can take it from like what we understand with Bitcoin to where either it's like, I don't even want to call it a ledger, but just almost like a, what's the right word I'm looking here?
Medium?
Like,
a medium?
Like another medium, but just a way to where they can go, okay, well, this translates into this amount of money on my phone, and I know how to use this because I understand how to use credits on my phone. I think the bigger issue is not necessarily getting your family to understand it, but to have businesses that will turn around and accept that credit. And so it needs to be worked on from a very basic structural issue. I don't think that we need to create too much of a new technology. We just need to have like something that sort of sits in a gap right there that'll like translate to SMS or whatever is necessary.
Yeah, I agree. If you can link it to something people already understand. Like another example is what NeoNB is doing in Cyprus. They're actually bringing out a debit card that's backed by Bitcoin, so people can just use it as they're so used to.
I think the huge advantage of Bitcoin in the emerging world in that respect is how easy it is to build a POS system. All you need is to print out a QR code. The problem is that there's no way for the customers currently to carry around Bitcoins because they're all using feature phones. Today, you know, a cheap Android phone will cost around $60. When we get it down to around $20 or $15, where it will be in 2 years, then we'll start seeing a mass adoption of smartphones. Already, smartphone penetration in Mexico is 30% and rising rapidly. So it's just a question of getting that into enough hands. But I don't know that grandma is on the horizon in that respect.
And there's also several startups working on allowing people to send Bitcoins via SMS. There are several companies working on that.
There's also another thing to take in.
A little closer.
Oh, yeah.
Here, well, for example, the main telecom operators in Latin America, which is América Móvil and Movistar, have several mobile solutions, but it hasn't worked like in Africa. They have closed it. They have Wanda, for example, that they closed it in Argentina, in Mexico, and all around the region, and also América Móvil with transfer. So the thing is, like, the people are cash cultures. So how are you going to convert them of using credit in your phone towards cash? And that's the biggest challenge, I think.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, just real quick on that last point. Capochi wallet, blockchain, Coinapult, I think even Coinbase all offer SMS Bitcoin payments. And then the recipient can just send those Bitcoins along if they want to. But my question was for Edan. You mentioned the Free Cities project in Honduras. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what kind of opportunities are going to be available for cryptocurrency entrepreneurs in particular? What's the progress with that? Thank you.
So what's happening in Honduras is very exciting because it's science fiction. You know, we've always dreamt of this idea that one day there will be these free cities, these policies, you know, the polis like in the old Greek times, where we'll be able to see communities come together and form around the kind of rules and regulations and societal structures that make most sense for them. And in the world of nation states, this hasn't been possible. What Honduras is doing is a grand experiment to make this possible, and they've designated a very, very large swath of the country and basically created a legal structure, constitutional legal structure, which allows any group, be it a community, a corporation, an NGO, to set up shop and begin competing for customers. So instead of thinking in terms of a government and citizens, thinking in terms of a service provider and customers, where everyone is competing for the same pool of customers, be they Hondurans or international. And so what I think we're going to see is a Cambrian explosion in terms of the kind of experiments we'll be able to see with better services for governance. And this is going to have an effect not just on Honduras, but in the entire world. Already there are a number of countries neighboring Honduras who are looking to implement similar projects, and we've already had similar conversations with countries in Africa, but this is going to affect everyone. So we're very excited about it, and the big question is, when does this actually happen? So you know the Ron Paul "It's Happening" meme? It's happening. The other meme, obviously, that we've got going now is soonish, which Mark Carpels has given us. It's happening soonish, but we will
also the "in 2 weeks" meme.
We will definitely see the first zones within the next year, probably before the end of 2014. There is a group of exceedingly high caliber international supporters. Most of them very wealthy or very well known in the worlds of academia or diplomacy, who have created a transparency council for Honduras. This council was formed 2 weeks ago, and they are now putting together the final touches, which will allow anyone to go and create Gulch Gulch, which we should discuss on a plot of land there in Honduras.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Vaghi, and I'm CEO of XBT Global, and I'm very excited to hear you mention the promise of integrating import-export, global trade, and Bitcoin, and I see that as one of the strongest mechanisms to add Bitcoin liquidity into Latin American markets. And I just wanted to get a perspective from the panel on where you see that is most needed, and the kind of what's your gauge on the market for that kind of service in Latin America, especially in Brazil. I mean, does Brazil have strong access to the more international exchanges and liquidity in the larger global market for Bitcoin and dollars, euros, yuan, etc.?
Okay, so in Brazil, we first of all, we are not allowed to trade in foreign currencies, so we only can trade in Brazilian real. That's our local currency, and we have very tight money controls. So even people that want to trade at Bitstamp, or the crazy ones that go to BTC. They find it hard, and it's tough to take money out of Brazil. So I don't see it getting better in the next months or years. What I've been talking I've been having initial conversation with other people from other countries to find ways, for example, to share the order book. That's would be another way. So it would be just my company and relating to other company abroad, and only us should sort how to share the book instead of each individual client going to international book like Bitstamp, for example. Use Bitcoin for international payments. For big ones in Brazil, it's very hard as well. I could find out myself, because I bought a Lamasu ATM, and I paid in Bitcoin, and then I jumped to a crazy regulation and a crazy importing papers to justify and to tell the government how I paid for the ATM. So I would not import another additional Lamasus paying them in Bitcoin, because it's counterproductive. It's a hell. So things need to get better, and our regulation for access to external markets is very, very painful.
Thank you. Jeffrey?
Hi. Can you please elaborate on Bitcoin adoption in Latin America, and also merchant adoption, and also your predictions for the next year of that?
Bitcoin adoption?
Well, I can tell you about Mexico right now. It's pretty small, but we see a lot of interest. Like, for example, in the first conference I went, I was the only one from Mexico, but now there's like 6-10 people coming to conferences, and the meetups we're organizing with several of the Mexicans that are here. We're getting like 100 persons. We're doing the 4 main cities. So I think it's going to grow pretty fast, and it's going to be interesting.
In Brazil, it's still a small market. We have about 30,000 clients in our database. Of those, I think about 5,000 are people that trade, at least trade at once. So it's not a big market, but I think that with the World Cup, we're gonna see like some people started dealing with Bitcoins, and I think that now that we do have a Portuguese version of a payment gateway that we are launching, we're gonna have more stores taking Bitcoin. I think the tourism industry will have a good influence on that. I think it's going to be increasing smoothly. It's not be a crazy adoption, but I think that we are on the right track, and I think that by the end of the year we're going to be a very different market, a very different environment, much better.
We have time for one last question, and then after the panel's over, if you guys don't mind going to the back where the comfy couches, and they can go and ask you questions there, that'd be great. Okay. Thank you.
So this is the final question, I suppose? Yeah.
Hi. My name is Valerian. I live and work in Los Angeles. I work in television as a producer-editor there. I introduced myself earlier. I'm actually working on a documentary television series that wants to get into in depth with Bitcoin, and one of the things that I'm really excited about is living in America. We hear, you know, the Wall Street story, the price is up, the price is down, but there's an entire global story that I think you guys represent that is very much, in my opinion at least, untold or undertold. So it's exciting that you guys are here and have obviously a very rapt audience who's into what you guys are doing. My question to you is, how do you see what you guys are doing in the context of, I guess, the larger, bigger picture? When you're working with Bitcoin, are you looking at it just as, okay, this is a technology that can help me do this in my market? Or do you ever look at what else is going on in other countries, what's going on in Europe, what's going on in China? Or does that not even really matter to you guys?
Interesting. Jeff?
Well, that was a lot of questions all in one question, but
Bitcoin is a big question.
yeah, it is. And first of all, you're talking about you're interested in covering different markets that are really uptaking in Bitcoin. You should really look at Argentina and Iran, because they both have capital controls, and Bitcoin's really caught on, and unfortunately we don't have anyone from Argentina or Iran here. What was your second question about? I forget.
What's the bigger picture?
Oh, the bigger picture. Okay, the bigger picture for me is that Bitcoin will destroy all central banks and all governments within 5 or 10 years.
When I think about Bitcoin, I think about it helping people who are traditionally underbanked eventually later on down the road, people who are not necessarily given access to credit, and by equalizing it, it actually opens up markets for people overseas.
Thank you so much, and like I said, they can meet you in the back if you guys have any further questions.
Thanks everyone, and thanks to the panelists.